water metaphors are great for me as a Navy SEAL is that as you do your work, and even in a singular practice, you can just imagine yourself just like sinking down into the ocean. And as you look up, you see the waves, and the waves represent the drama, the stories, the choppiness, the thoughts. And down here, it's still.
Still, yeah.
That's where that term "still water runs deep" comes from.
Can't be contained.
That's what I'm talking about. Mark, thank you so much for coming down to the studio. It's so great to meet you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's awesome to be here. Thanks.
So what is the number one thing right now about life that's making you feel the most alive?
Well, life makes me feel alive. What else is there?
What else is there? Yeah.
It's great that you say that because we jump right into awareness development. But the more I get into deep contemplation, meditation, I end up there. That we are life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only thing standing between absolute bliss and like the understanding or appreciation of that is the ego. It's the false perception of who you are as a separate individual that has to struggle.
What's your relationship with your ego when you hear the voice of your ego and you observe that lower voice or whatever you call it? How do you relate to that part of you so that you know that it's not your true essence or who you truly are?
Yeah, it's a playful detachment.
Oh.
Right? It's almost like a sibling or a partner that sometimes, gets out of line and needs to be, smacked down a little bit. There's times to like bring it forth, but to bring it forth with awareness that is, the ego is not the main actor. The ego is in service. Ultimately, humility is getting the ego to be in service all the time, and to have the awareness to be able to magnify the positive aspects of ego, and then to diminish or mute or ignore negative conditioning. Right? There's no such thing as a perfect personality. We are all just this massive bundle of conditioning or training. And so you could say the ego is that. It's the conditioned mind that believes in certain things, that acts in a certain way, that has a set of mental constructs that create this reality. And so awareness practice, whether you approach it through breath work or meditation or spontaneous enlightenment, whatever, shifts your perception to see that as a mental construct. The entirety of that is a mental construct. It's fabrication. It's made up. And so so my relationship to the ego is that's not what I am. Those are thoughts. Those are emotions based upon the construct, the trained and conditioned mind, but it's not what I am.
So what do you listen for when you're listening for your true self?
Absolute silence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more of an essence than a language.
It's the beingness. Yeah, but it's that aliveness we were talking about, that pure aliveness. Let's say, okay, so you're a breathwork expert. In our training, we do a lot of breathwork as well, as you know. And so you can have an experience in breathwork that is one of just expansive awareness. It's not the same as like an out-of-body experience, but expansive awareness where you are aware of being alive, but there's no thought. And while you're having that thought, you can perceive a thought arising.
Yeah.
And you can hold both simultaneously.
Yeah.
The perception that I am pure awareness and the perception that there's a thought arising within this awareness. And the pure awareness, it's not like there's no conversation there. There's no voice from God. It's just absolute stillness.
Yeah.
It is source. And, it's like it's the background.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the ground of being.
In my experience, there's such a full nature to that nothingness, if that makes sense. It's like when I get in those deep meditative states where if I'm meditating, it takes me like 8 minutes to kind of unhook from the chaotic 3D world and really get into myself. And then once I'm there is absolute nothing, and there is such a depth of fullness.
Yeah. This is why, like, when the spiritual traditions talk about it as via negativa, there is no words to describe, because words are all built on dualistic, thinking.
Yes.
And so they can only be pointers. So you can point. So this idea, this is why you get a lot of confusion and also contradictions, because it is nothingness. It's no thingness.
Yeah.
But it's also everythingness.
Yes.
And the two are the same.
Yes.
But, if you try to analyze that conceptually, it doesn't make any sense. How can something be nothing and everything at the same time? Well, that's the point.
Yeah.
The non-dual, thing, it is everything, and it is nothing, and it is
How's
alive,
that for a mind fuck for you guys?
So there's a great quote from one of my teachers, a guy named Nisargadatta Maharaj, and he says, "My heart tells me I am everything. My mind tells me I'm nothing. Between the two, my life flows."
I didn't realize you had such a depth of spirit to you until just this interview, which is really amazing.
That's cool.
Yeah,
You know
I
what's
really love
interesting about that?
What?
Like, I was just talking to someone else about this. Like, this whole idea of spiritual development is actually kind of it's a false idea. You can't develop your spirit. You are your spirit. So what you're actually doing is ego development. And so ego development means to strengthen the ego to get to the point where then you can dissolve it. If you try to dissolve the ego before you've strengthened the structures to where you have the confidence, the knowingness, oh yeah, it's okay to now dissolve the ego, then you get all sorts of dysfunctional development, like ego, spiritual bypassing, emotional.
Let's talk about developing the ego. Because that may be perceived to some people as developing identities to keep us safe, but I don't think that's
not what I mean.
what you mean.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit more about that.
So all of personal development is about developing the ego. Again, this is limitations with language, right? So definition of ego doesn't mean I have a big ego, chest pumping ego. It means that is my self-concept as an individuated, separate individual in this 3D dualistic world. It's the way the game is rigged, so it's okay. We all have an ego and a personality, so enjoy it. So development is to strengthen the egoic structures that are generally wounded through lack of love in early childhood. And there's very, very few human beings who don't, right? The whole point of separation is you're coming in to this 3D world to basically experience suffering, challenge.
Yeah.
And so your life is a struggle. Consider the enormous amount of work that goes into just keeping these bodies going. From the moment we wake up in the morning to the moment we close our eyes at night, we're just like, and then the ego development of trying to find meaning in the world and find our place, and the way our society is structured, it's a constant battle to be noticed, to be competent, to become an expert at this or an expert at that. So that you can then trade your time for money or trade your creativity for money and provide to it's nonstop. So the ego development is all about strengthening the sense of individual identity up to a point where you recognize that there's strengthening it any further is taking you in the wrong direction.
I got you. So there's like a tipping point there.
There's a tipping point. There's a turnaround, right? And so I compare this to kind of like the yoga concept of the outgoing path and then the indwelling path, right? Or you can compare it to the inhale and the exhale, right? Yeah. So we have this, or the yogis also have the term bogi versus yogi.
Yeah.
Right? So some people are just permanently on this outgoing path. They're not going to turn inward. So they're in this bogey stage. They're just all about experience, and and that's great. But there's a point where the ego says, you know what? I've tried everything. I'm really strong. I'm actually even like a humble leader but the ego is saying that. The identity is saying
The
that.
identity is saying that. So meta.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not getting me where I perceive I need to go. And where is that? It's this subtle, soft yearning for peace, like happiness, the happiness that is your natural state, not the happiness that comes
Not the
from
manufactured
relieving,
happiness, yeah.
stress or,
Yeah.
achieving
Yeah.
something you desire. So that means at that point, then you stop developing the ego. You start, instead of accruing, gaining, achieving, you start to remove. Let's go back to what we were talking about before we started. Like, there's a point where you just say, okay, I don't need any more. Like, there's not another degree I need or another certificate I need or another training I need to go to. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Because everything you have is right here.
Right here.
And the only thing standing in the way of that is that ego that's grasping for more out there. And so the turnaround becomes when you begin to work on the ego to stop grasping.
Yeah.
Stop reaching for something.
Yeah.
Stop chasing the idols.
There it is. Yeah. The discipline of non-wanting is definitely something that is so counterintuitive to the modern models of what makes us happy or what's reflected back to us, right? It's like, well, in order to be this, that, and the other, we have to achieve this and want this and go. And so there's this distorted desire that is baked into the ethos of our operating system and puts us in this trance of constantly wanting, which ultimately makes us feel dead inside.
That's right.
And I believe it takes so much practice. It's a practice of realizing that the things that you think will fulfill you actually leave you feeling dead. And then it's a practice of asking yourself, what are those things that actually truly fulfill me on a deep level? And in my experience, when I found breathwork 15 years ago in Bali, it was when I was struggling with an eating disorder, body image stuff. I had so much anxiety. I would wake up in the morning and the first thought in my mind was like, I just can't wait to go to bed tonight because the mental chatter was so intense and I didn't have the wisdom to disassociate my ego from my true self. So I was like, this is just who I am. Like, I am just this super anxious person. And I realized after that first breathwork session, I was feeling everything that I thought would come through the external world in that moment with nothing. And it was in that moment where I'm like, shit, how this has been here the entire time. I don't need to make all this money or do all these things or have all these achievements. And, my upbringing, so much of the love that I received was for the things that I did, right? I was a dancer. I was a child actress. I did all these things. And so in that moment, lying on that floor in Bali, I was like, I don't need any of this shit.
That's right.
It's all right here.
Yeah.
So take us back. You served as a SEAL for 20 years. That is crazy. So
it was crazy fun.
Was it fun?
I'll tell you that. Oh, yeah. So serving in the special ops unit, most of the guys will tell you, is like the best thing that a guy could do in a world. And it also sucks miserably.
Yeah.
Like, it is awful at times, but it's the kind of awful that when you're done with it and you reflect back on what you just accomplished and what you did and what you endured, you wouldn't change a thing. It's so strange, right? You wouldn't change a thing. So
kind of like parenting, right?
yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
that was intense.
Maybe childbirth goes in there as well, but I don't have a lot of authority to speak on that. Yeah. 20 years. Now, 10 of that was active duty for me and 10 reserves. And the reserves were interesting. I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with the reserves here. You're not really in, but you're not out.
Yeah.
You're kind of riding the line. When you're in uniform, you are like an active duty guy, but when you're not, you get to be a civilian. So it's the best of both worlds.
Here's my curiosity. You left the military and you turned your life into something truly extraordinary where now you're helping people with mental resiliency and leadership and really truly becoming powerful individuals. that's not always the case for people who leave the military. Oftentimes there's a lot of PTSD and a lot of depression, suicide.
That's true.
What was it about the way that you viewed the world or the way that you viewed yourself that let 20 years of service be the catalyst, the trampoline to creating so much expansion and becoming Mark Divine?
Well, first I'll have to credit, I guess, karma. I didn't grow up thinking I was going to the military. Military was not something that my family did.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, in fact, there was a very negative association with the military. My father was in the Army for like 2 or 3 years because a judge basically said, after he drove his car into a fraternity house drunk and drugs, the judge was like,
get in there.
A, you could go to jail. B, you could join the Army. Dad goes, B, before the word was out of his mouth. Like, okay. So off he goes in the Army. And he had a miserable experience because it was like the 11th Airborne, which was in Germany in the late 50s. And they were all a bunch of drunks. And, they didn't really have a mission. And so he was always down in the military. Military was something that, from my mom and dad's perspective, that you did if you didn't have any other options in life. And they were, well-to-do family. He had a business that's over 100 years old. So anyways, that's a long way of saying military found me. The SEALs found me. Or my spirit, insisted on it.
I was going to say, they saw you working out. They're like, that bicep needs to be in here.
That bicep needs to be. The way it worked for me is, Samantha, I started meditating when I was 21. So I just graduated college, and I followed kind of the drumbeat of the footsteps down in Manhattan. I went to Colgate University, upstate New York, and so of course everyone's getting jobs down in Manhattan, working for financial services, and I got a job with Coopers and Lybrand, now PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they sent me to NYU to get my master's degree, and so there I was, basically working to get a CPA, my master's in accounting, to become a consultant, and I was an athlete at the time, and I was someone who already saw myself as a lifetime athlete. This is 1985. So here I am in Manhattan, concrete jungle, and I see all these pasty bodies around me, and it's very hard to train in that city. But I wasn't going to let myself go, right, physically. So I would run in the morning, and lunchtime I'd go to the gym, and then in the evening I had a 2.5 hour window between when Coopers would let us off because there was a cohort. We were going to go to NYU down at the World Trade Center. I had this block of time, which most people would go back to their apartment and change and do some homework. Yeah. I was like, that's a good time for me to do some more training. What am I going to do? Right? I don't want to go for another run. I tried doing the triathlon thing for a while, but so I was walking down 22nd Street or 23rd Street one day, and I kind of heard these shouts coming out from the second floor of this building, and I just stopped and said, what is that? I looked up, and there's a big sign that said World Sado Karate Headquarters. And I didn't really know anything about the martial arts. There wasn't much of it in my town. There was none of it, as a matter of fact. But here I was in the Big Apple, and I went upstairs, and I saw my first mentor, a guy named Nakamura. And he was the founder of this school. He had, by that time, he had 300,000 students worldwide. Wow. And he was a grandmaster. He was a hero in Japan. I started to practice with him karate, and one night I stayed to watch the black belt class, which was on a Thursday night. And after the black belt class, I hung around and talked to one of the guys, and I saw them turn the lights down and light a candle in the corner of the room, and about 10 people stayed. Everyone else started filtering out and getting really quiet. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, oh, this is the Zen class. I'm like, Zen? Yeah. It goes, yeah. So I did a little research. It was pre-internet. Yeah.
I went to the library.
Everyone thinks do research. You just ChatGPT. Tell me all about Zen. No, I actually had to go to the library. What is Zen? I got a book by a guy named Suzuki, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Yep. I devoured that, and I'm like, that's interesting. Still is all conceptual. I didn't really understand it. So I asked Nakamura if I could join that class. They're all black belts. Yeah. And he said, okay, sure. So I started doing those Thursday class. So we did an hour-long sit on a wooden bench, a Zazen bench.
Yeah, there it is.
And we did, after, I love these sessions because 45 minutes of just sitting in silence. And he had a process, right?
Yeah.
So it was classic breath work, concentration training. So Zen, I called it concentration camp.
Yeah.
Because it was really hard. So we would have to basically inhale, exhale, count one, inhale, exhale, count two, and you're not thinking everything, but you're thinking about the count.
Yeah.
So it's concentration training.
Yeah.
So the whole point about Zen, they're very, it's very structured in terms of how they develop your mind to be able to access satori or higher states. And they recognize that it's kind of what I was talking about, ego development. You have to stabilize the thought streams in order to what we call turn the light around, be able to turn your energy, which is directed outward, inward, which is where meditation really starts to bear its fruit.
Yeah.
So we had to basically learn how to concentrate. And it took a long time. Like I remember literally, I couldn't get past 3. And because you had to be honest with yourself too. Because most of the time I'd get to 10 and be like, oh shit, I've been thinking since about 3. You know what I mean?
Right.
My monkey mind is off to the races. So anyways, I'm turning a short story into a long story, but that's kind of the way I roll. It took me months to where I could get past like 5 and be like, yeah, I actually did that.
Yeah.
Where there were no other thoughts except for inhale, exhale 1, inhale, exhale 2. And so I felt like, okay, I'm making some progress. So I marked that as a success, just kept on training. And then about 9 months into the practice, I started to have those experiences that you talked about from your first breath work, where I'd be like, okay, this is going well. And then nothing but inky blackness. And pure, like just awareness. Like I'm not drifting off to sleep. I'm just like, time stops. Everything feels, I guess how I describe it, I literally felt like I was in a solid block of reality. I couldn't move, but it's utterly so inky black that it was bright.
Yeah.
And there was all everythingness right there. And then you would come out of it. And sometimes it was like 20 minutes. And sometimes it was a minute or less.
Yeah.
You didn't really have any sense. And after those sessions, when that would happen, the experience would stay with me for hours. Like I feel like I'm walking about an inch above the pavement to the subway. And the subway, everything's like cackling energy. And I'm like thick, like I'm swimming.
I know the feeling.
It's so intense. I was like, and so here I am, 21 years old, and I start having these experiences, and I'm like, okay, I think there's something to this meditation.
Yeah,
I'm going
like
to
something's
stick with
happening
it.
here. Yeah.
So I bought myself a little bench, and I started practicing every single morning, and I've never stopped since then. So I went into the SEALs because of my meditation practice.
I got you. That's a different pathway than most
It's very
people.
different. I don't think I've ever heard anyone
interesting.
say that. So because I was going to become MBA CPA.
Yeah.
Then I was going to shift and go into like investment banking and make a ton of money.
Yeah.
Just like everyone else and all my peers who are
Could you imagine?
super wealthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, kings of the world.
Yeah.
And
But dead
sitting
inside.
on that bench after after some time, when the mystical experiences started to wear off, which is something we should talk about, right? Because those are a distraction.
Yeah.
Right? They're cool.
Yeah.
But you don't want to keep striving for another experience.
100%. I remember like right after I found breathwork, I was like, oh my God, I can create magic every second of the day. And then I was so in my inner world that I felt a little bit dissociated from my external world. And I actually stopped caring about things in my external world as much as I used to because I didn't have much emphasis on it. I'm like, well, none of this shit
That's the
actually
early
matters.
sign of a spiritual bypass. So good thing that you found yourself.
I caught it,
You
dude.
caught it
Because
in
I could have
time.
been like, those like rainbow moon dancer people who just change their name and just don't care about anything. I was like, oh, this isn't good. I need to care just as much about my human experience
That's right.
as I do my spiritual experience, and how can I have those two things amalgamate,
Integrated.
integrated? Yeah.
That's what Advaita means, not two. Those aren't two separate things.
Yes.
It's one.
Yes.
And so people who have chased mystical experience, the light or the, whatever, tend to develop that detachment as if that's a better place to be,
Right.
without realizing it's not two. That is here right now. So bring that forth.
Right. Yes.
Now.
Bring it forth
Bring
now.
it forth now.
Yes.
In
yes.
beingness, in presence.
Yes.
And back, like I could have answered your first question, like what's making you feel alive? Well, presence makes you feel alive because presence is life.
100%. But I think because people talk about presence so much, and you see it on every Instagram quote, it almost falls on deaf ears a little bit to
Absolutely.
most people.
Yeah.
Be present, be present. It's like, okay. But the actual practice of presence ignites something in us that makes us feel alive. I totally
There's
agree
a
with
qualitative difference when you pay attention between constructing a thought, which is always based upon memory.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're thinking of the past or the future, it's always based upon memory. It's a construct. So the mental energy and even the activation experience within your brain, you can actually feel that when you construct thought.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you construct thought from memory, you're not present. You're not allowing the presence of pure awareness. Right? You're shutting it out.
So how do you deal with big failures in your life? Say it's like a business failure. Maybe you had like 2 months where you guys just shit the bed in the business and lost a ton of money, which happens.
Have you been reading my notes?
Your assistant sent me your P&L. I actually have your P&L right here.
I thought that was a secret. Oh my God.
So how do you deal with that without getting pulled into scarcity or shit, this whole thing's going to crash and burn in front of me? How do you maintain that when that's very real and tangible?
I do it much better now. Practice always comes first. And as you know, life is a practice. And so when things are apparently falling down around you, man, that's an incredible opportunity, right? To reinvigorate your practice and to step away from the drama, right? So just as you have a thought and that thought can either define you or you can move away from that thought and be like, oh, look at that interesting thought. So dramas are just a bunch of thoughts colliding, yours and others, right? Like take a business, for instance. You set something in motion and it works for a while and then the universe pushes back against it.
Yeah.
And then there's a time where it doesn't work because nothing lasts forever in the temporal world, right? Everything is temporary. So I'm going through it right now with my business. I have to completely transform it because, man, SEALFIT, I started in 2006. We were teaching box breathing to Navy SEAL candidates in 2006.
So awesome.
Right?
Original gangster.
And exactly, OG. And here it is, like 2024, and I'm like, okay, wait, people are earning money teaching breathing? What?
Yeah, who are those?
Who are
those people?
How did that happen? How did I miss that?
You and I weren't friends then. I would have helped you.
And what we're doing is amazing, but I think we're way too ahead of our own ability to communicate. Like we do integrated vertical development. But we're trying to change consciousness. We're trying to change. So are you, but we did it like coming at it from everything, this perspective, like physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, spiritual.
Yeah.
And when I started that, it was most people were kind of coming at it for the mental toughness.
Yeah.
And the resiliency. And there was very few, I was like the only one doing it. And now, gosh, there's probably 100 SEALs who've written books. And there's a boatload of people now doing this type of work. And so I have to completely reinvent. So back to the question, the business is a clash of all these ideas. The universe has its say. And awareness practice is to constantly just set yourself up in the observer role and to say, okay, how are those ideas and thoughts that I put out there into the universe yesterday, a week ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, how are they kind of resonating now? Like how's the universe kind of, are they merging with them, or is it meeting serious resistance? And when it starts to meet serious resistance, it's time to make a change. If you wait too long, then you're going to have what people would call a failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so awareness practice can be extraordinarily valuable for professional career or entrepreneurship, because you get to see, it's like you be like a surfer. You can see the wave cresting and you can make adjustments beforehand in real time.
Question.
So but I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. You did. I want to double click a little bit deeper into it. So there are certain things that 2 years ago in my business, this particular vertical, crushed it. It was like so easy. I wouldn't even have to do anything, and it just produced revenue. And now to get that thing up and running, it's taking so much more effort. How do you discern the difference between the universe pushing back on that and to say, all right, Sam, it's time to pivot versus go harder or find a new strategy for that thing, but keep putting your energy towards that thing?
Yeah.
That's the point where I get a little bit confused.
Yeah, this is a great question, because sometimes you feel the ego says, this is the right path. I'm committed. I've already invested. I'm going to double down. And if it's not the right thing or the right path or the right form, then that doubling down is going to double the resistance.
Yeah.
So for me, I try to practice this idea of Wei Wu Wei, action without the actor. So what that means is back to our conversation about the ego, like who's doing the action? If you're meeting resistance, it's likely that your ego is too invested in it. Your ego is doing the action.
I can feel that.
Yeah. And so if you can just like wait and not take any action until the action happens, irrespective of you not taking action, and then you know that action is coming from
For sure.
source or the higher,
sure.
Through you.
Yeah.
And it feels effortless.
Yeah.
That's where the concept of shibumi is, that effortless perfection. It's a martial arts term, but it applies to what we're talking about. Like it's when things feel so effortless that they can't not be done. They can't not be done, is what I meant to say. And even then, the outcome may not be what your ego desired, but it's what needed to happen.
Yeah.
So that's a practice.
Yeah.
So how I played this one, or I use this principle, and how I look at like meta practice versus micro practice, right? So life is a practice, every day is a practice, and then your seated meditation or breathing is a practice. So it's all, it's like the Rorschach nesting doll, right? So life as a practice is to practice Wei Wu Wei and always ask, okay, is this ego or is this spirit? And like especially when things happen, like I was in a government contracting situation. I started a nationwide mentoring program for Navy SEAL candidates back in 2005. This is before SEALFIT. And, pretty lucrative contract, like $10 million a year, very profitable. Yeah. And my ego was like, all right, I think we found a groove here, right? Yeah. This is going to be where I make my $100 million. And a year later, the contract got challenged by a small $1 billion firm called Blackwater USA. Right.
Just little.
Yeah. Who are very all over the news for their work in Iraq, very aggressive. I know some of the SEALs over there, anyways. So the contract got thrown out because they challenged the prime contractor on size. We were a subcontractor to a prime contractor. We were doing the work. Yeah. The client, who's a recruiting command of the Navy, loved what we were doing. But Blackwater came in and said, we want that contract, basically. And they manipulated it to where they stole the contract from us. So 5 years supposed to have this contract, and we were doing, we set it all up. We were kicking ass, taking names, and then it got stolen. It got stolen. So everyone is telling me, Mark, you got to fight them,
Yeah.
right? You got to challenge this. And because of my meditation practice, I would sit on my bench and just go into that kind of deep state of awareness. And there was no impulse to fight. There was no impulse to stay in that. And so what's beautiful about this practice is then you can, from that place, you can reactivate the ego with some line of questioning and say, okay, if that's not it, then what is?
Then what is? Yeah.
Like, show me.
Yes.
Show me what is. And so this process literally took like a week where I was like, okay, ego wants to fight because the ego loves fighting. Especially a warrior, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't, I'm not a doormat, right? I will go to it, right? But in this case, every time I went to the meditation bench, I did not get that impulse. But what I did do is I got an impulse to do that work, but do it more creatively and do it for the individuals, not for the government.
I just got goosebumps.
And that's where SEALFIT came from.
Hell yeah, dude. That's so good.
Right? And so that was practicing Wei Wu Wei because my ego and my action, everyone's recommendation, my advisors.
Yeah. Like, go do
the
that thing.
money
Go
was
fight.
there to go fight them and to get that contract back and blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, that's not it. And out of that came SEALFIT. And out of SEALFIT came all the rest of the work that I've done. Came all this massive creative spurt. 7 books and all these training programs came out of that decision.
So wild.
How cool is that?
It's so cool. And then you can look back on that, and evidence creates confidence. So if you ever find yourself in a similar position, then you can go, oh, wait a second. No, I have the wisdom and intelligence now to know that when I take action, when my ego is fired up, then I'm going to create destruction. And what if I take this path that my soul is speaking, and look what it turns into?
And in the practice, when asked those questions, to get to that still point, and you can ask, what's the main obstacle? Yeah. So I've been doing that now, like as I described, business needs to be transformed for whatever's trying to emerge next. Anytime you create a structure in the world, it has a long tail and it can trap you, right? Because things that you put out in the world and you think they're forever, they're not forever. But it takes time and energy to disengage from something that you create. Yeah. It's very challenging, actually. So any entrepreneur knows exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. You can't just walk away from your business. You got employees, you got, I couldn't shut my business down today if I wanted to. Yeah. And we've contracted for stuff a year out, For sure. It takes a long time to actually wind down a business.
Absolutely.
So asking myself in those moments of that, where you find that still point, like, what is the obstacle to what needs to emerge right now?
Such a good question.
And so it's going to be different for everyone. They all comes down to something in your ego, right? Something in your mental construct is inhibiting it. And so what is that? Yeah. And for me, like, I've been a lone wolf. I don't have any partners. I don't have any investors. I don't have a board of directors.
How good is it though, right?
It's got its pros and cons, but then
I know, I'm in the same boat. I feel the same.
The problem with that is you don't have anyone to hand it off to.
For sure.
And it's all your money, right? And so if the business needs resources to keep it afloat, or where does it come from?
Your back pocket. There you go.
Exactly. So I said, okay, well, that business, SEALFIT, and we have a gear business now called Brute Force. We do like unstable load training. So we've got backpacks and weight, weight vests and race rucks and sandbags and really cool stuff. That old kind of ruggedized, austere fitness, mental toughness training business, it's awesome. I love it, but it needs to survive without me. And so for me to do that, I need to get out of the way. Yeah. And in order for me to get out of the way, I need to set up the conditions for other people to be incentivized, for other money, right? The whole like real business that has all of that without me.
Yeah. And that's
so
leadership.
that's
you know?
what's happening right now for
Yeah.
my business, like trying to erase myself with a pencil eraser from part of it, and
Yeah.
so I can free myself up to do what's next for me.
What is next for you?
I love working with teams. So I have this concept, Samantha, that the team is the new leader.
I love that.
There's no one individual that can deal with the complexity
Yes.
that our world is, and so
Yes.
leaders like are trying to they're trying to hack their way to a place they can't get to, right? There's no amount of breath work or some sort of biohack that's going to give you the awareness
Yeah.
to navigate the VUCA that's coming. So it has to be a team of individuals acting with shibumi, acting with spontaneous creativity.
Yeah.
And so how do you get a team of individuals all committed to a mission and a vision, aligned in a vision, but committed to a mission to create that level of awareness? And it's possible. Like the Navy SEALs had it. I recognize this. Wow, that's very kind of hidden secret is the SEALs are called the SEAL teams, not the SEAL individuals.
Yeah. There you go.
Everyone focuses on the individuals thinking, wow, you're a badass Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I was badass because of the team.
Because of the team. Yeah, absolutely.
And so the most effective leadership of an elite team that has that spontaneous problem-solving creative, capacity is very different than what most people think.
Yeah.
Right? It's extremely humble, servant leadership. It has to come from a high level of awareness and compassion. And literally where you are there to remove obstacles
Yeah.
and to support.
Yeah. 100%.
And that's what I want to teach, post PhD in global leadership and change, which is an apt kind of, it's just really doing it for the,
Yeah.
for the public perception, because, if you go into corporations, like I told you the story about Amazon, they're much more inclined to hire a bunch of PhDs than they are a bunch of Navy SEALs. So I'm bridging that gap.
Yeah. Leadership is really an interesting concept. And I think people have an idea of what leadership is. And I think many people want to be leaders, but it takes a certain type of person to be able to hold what it takes to be a leader. And I'll just share a little bit of my experience. I started entrepreneurship 12 years ago, and my idea of a leadership was just, this is my business and I will do everything and I'll have these people working for me, but like it's my thing and da-da-da. And I realized like how suffocating that was and how uncomfortable that was and how terrible it was. And over the last 5 years, I've really trained this muscle on what is a servant leader. I love that you said that, because that's what I think about all the time. Like, what does servant leadership look like? And it really requires, especially when you own 100% of your business, you don't have investors and you have all these people working with you. It's truly about monitoring that ego and like really babysitting it 24/7.
Yeah, I love
because
that.
the
Babysitting
second
ego.
that it takes over, it becomes destructive.
Right.
And yeah, it's been like such an interesting shift for myself of just this art of recognizing every single person on my team as a leader.
That's right.
And making the assumption that most of the time they know more than I do and they know better. And like, what is the true value that I can bring to a team? Well, it's vision, right? Setting a rock solid vision for them so they can be all aligned to the same thing. Like you said, support. Like, what is it that you need? How can I support you? And like paving the path, like letting go of getting rid of the resistance so they could actually just get in there, create momentum, and all come to the same vision. But it's interesting. It really requires a lot. Like, I think most businesses fail not because they have the wrong business strategy or the wrong product market fit or whatever it is. It's the psychology of the leader. Look at the leadership in our world right now. It is awful.
It's awful. Capital A, awful. You're right. And this is the challenge for leaders, because they're taught, this is part of the training, the conditioning. They're taught that they're in charge and that they have a lot to offer in regard to their, positionality, because they've earned it. There's a lot of work to get there to become the leader. A lot of risk, right? A lot of time, a lot of intelligence, right? So all of that. So there's a feeling of like, I've earned this. And now it's like, I've got to deliver.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so right there, you're heading in the wrong direction, right? Because the energy of the team is, they know that there's this positional thing called a leader. They know that the leader is often, if not always, the limiting factor. Now, you can also have other limiting factors in a team, like anyone's energy that isn't like really, really optimized for service can be a limiting factor, but it shouldn't be the leader.
Yeah.
And so energetically, the leader can either shut the team down or open them up for brilliance. And so how do you do that?
Yeah.
So most of the work of the leader is like shadow work and developing the awareness to show up with an open heart and radical inclusiveness, like you said, because you don't know where the next brilliant idea will come from. You know?
Yeah.
And checking your ego at the door. Development. So we would call it vertical development versus horizontal development. So in the past leadership development, even most personal development was horizontal, like go out and get these skills. That's kind of the whole hacking community. It's vertical development, you go in to change how your mind works, not the content, but literally how it works. That's meta-noesis. Change the mind to be, to allow more light through, allow more spirit through, which then is experienced as more compassion.
Yeah.
More inclusiveness, greater to take, have greater perspective, more creativity, because there's, again, more life force flowing
more
through
energy,
the aperture of the brain. And so it's back into this process of removing, not adding. So leadership development in the future is like removing obstacles to your natural brilliance and then doing that collectively as a team. So we're doing with organizations, we're doing breath work with corporate teams, with executive teams, and we're doing visioning work, and we're setting it up so that they become a community of practice.
Yeah.
So the work is not someplace you go and suddenly you drop down your energy level and you sit in your cubicle and you bang away at your work. It's where you go.
Who designed that?
Yes, awful. The entire setup of our culture is designed to shut us down.
Absolutely. Everything, everywhere
and
you
cut
go.
us off from ourselves.
100%.
I think that's by design, but that's a whole
100% is by design. That'll be our next podcast.
Yeah.
How the world is trying to fuck us.
We have to, if you want to be free, you have to recognize that first.
Yes, absolutely.
The first thing, your first job is to recognize that you have been trained since birth to be shut off, shut down, cut off,
disconnected from your power.
Disconnected and utterly reliant on the government, corporations, for your food. I mean, look at it. Like when I was let's not go down this rabbit hole, but one quick story. When I grew up in upstate New York in the 60s, I turned 60 this year.
Wow.
Crazy, huh?
That's amazing. I
still have trouble wrapping my head around that one.
That's so great. I love this.
Want to do some burpees? I think burpees keep me.
Oh my God, you would crush me in the gym. I would be so scared. Actually, we should work out one day. I'll be inspired.
Yeah. So in the 60s, my mom, had a partner friend, Carolyn, who had a little dairy farm, and they had this big garden, and we had all this fresh food. And I remember her canning and jarring things in the wintertime, and we ate the beef. Wasn't that good?
Beef?
Don't eat. No. It was dairy, right? So, every once in a while, a cow got old, and they're like, okay, we're going to, take Bezzy here, and she'll be our meat for the winter. The butcher would chop it up and go in their freezer, and then, we're still eating it months later, and we're looking at our mom and dad going, Betty doesn't taste very good.
She's too old.
Anyways, but we ate off the land.
Yeah.
And we were extraordinarily healthy. And then one day, a microwave shows up. And my mom's like, this is awesome. It's going to make things so much easier. We can just heat things up, Of course, we all heard the stories about don't put the cat in the microwave to dry him off. It's a bad idea. We're like, okay, get that. And then TV dinners show up.
Yeah.
Oh, this is super convenient, right? Nobody talked about nutrition.
Yeah.
It's all about convenience. And so next thing you know, they stopped the garden because they didn't need it, because everything that you needed was in the grocery store. And by the way, it came packaged in these little tin dinner plates and just serve that to the kids and the family. And wow, now I've got all this extra time and I don't have to do all that work.
Right.
At what cost?
Your health, your mental health, your
right.
connection
Also,
to divine. Yeah.
Being outside, hands on the earth, being in community with others.
Yes.
All of this stuff that we pine for now, literally 60 years ago was natural. And then guess what? All those farms go away and they get bought up by whom? Conglomerates, governments, whatever. And now it's like completely out of your hands. How you could look at every single industry, the food industry. Like we used to have a relationship with our doctor and our dentist, and we would go and he would write on a little piece of paper at the end of the month. We'd get an invoice, and my parents would pay that. I told you my little nightmare story. I served for 20 years as SEAL, and I'm battling to get TRICARE.
Crazy.
I have to fight for it. I'm like, what?
What's going on here?
What's going on here?
Yeah.
So all these institutions have interceded between you and
nature,
the provider, or you and nature. Anyways, it is awful.
I love that we're having this conversation. It's such an important topic, and I haven't talked about this on the podcast as much as I am going to in the future. And it's truly about sovereignty, which is so much about what you teach in all of your programs, and thinking for ourselves and realizing that the government's not got our back, and we have to be aware of our healthcare, especially after the COVID fuckery, and like the whole debacle with that. It's like, are you kidding me? If that didn't wake up America, I don't know what the hell is going to, right? Our bodies.
It didn't wake everybody up.
I know, which is scary. But, and also, I go back and forth on this because I'm like, some souls came here on this planet to not wake up and just to live asleep, right? And so it's like, okay, well, if that amount of like manufactured pressure didn't wake someone up to their divinity, then nothing's going to. So just let them be asleep and whatever, right? I just think that's part of life.
It is. It's all consciousness.
100%.
And so within consciousness, you got the villains and you got the heroes and you got the in-game players.
It's a game. It's a one big game.
You got the in-game players who are just going from A to B to C.
There you go.
Right?
100%.
And so most people who are listening to this are like, I'm not an in-game player.
Yeah.
Or else you wouldn't be listening to a podcast like this.
Exactly.
Or you wouldn't be attracted to breath work or to what I'm doing. So great. Check.
Yeah.
You got the green check mark. You've taken the red pill. Now what? Well, now it's about deconditioning, deprogramming, unlearning.
Yeah.
Because of the intensity of the training program of our Western culture it's so intense that you don't even by pretending to wake up, you're still part of it. Your brain has been steeped in it.
Yeah.
Our language.
Yeah.
Right? Our everything. Just this idea, our ideas about money, our ideas about time, our ideas about work.
100%.
Like I've always wondered about this. Like, okay, who says that, and how is this even possible that an economy, whether it's a nation state or the global economy, is supposed to grow every year? Whose idea was that?
Yeah.
And like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
Built upon a linear system of extraction, production, and then waste. It's impossible, which is why we have all the degradation and destruction, because there's no way you can have a linear up where in the industrial mindset that just extracts, produces, and then throws shit out. So we get oceans worth of garbage floating around in the middle of it. So, okay, that's a really bad idea. But nobody's having a conversation about, nobody at a real level, power level having a conversation. They're just like, yeah, we need to keep growing. We need inflation to be 2 to 3%. Really? Who says?
Who says this? Yeah.
Right? Why is that good for your citizenry? It's how about not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
It's not good for the average people who are busting their butts. So who says that's a good idea? You got to challenge everything.
Yeah.
Challenge, it goes back to, like, again, at a meta level, via negativity. Not this, not that.
Yeah.
That is the masterful spiritual practice. It's like, what is reality? Oh, it's not that. It's not my beliefs about religion. That's not reality. It's not my beliefs about government. It's not my beliefs about who I am. I'm not my degrees.
Yeah.
I was a Navy SEAL. This body was a Navy SEAL, but that's not who I am. So you keep on identifying what you're not or what reality is not, and it just starts to lay bare what reality is. And the more and more you commit to that, you end up in that place that you described, and we were talking about earlier. You end up in that everything that I need is my natural state.
Yeah.
And in my natural state, I have everything I need. Peace of mind, contentment, happiness, abundance. Wow. And then from there, you can then project back out and recreate your reality. Yeah. And what normally happens is that you create it with a very light touch. Very simple, right? Very, air quote, normal, because you don't need that stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I resist a lot. I resist a lot of speaking engagements. I resist being on stage because I feel that ego hit. And I don't need that.
Yeah.
I will do it if Wei Wu Wei, if I like, okay, this one, it's a do, right?
Yeah.
It's a fit. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll go do it. But if I sit there and be like, yes or no, and I get the no, then I don't go. And the metaphor I use is I'm in the center while yes and no are chasing around the circumference.
Yeah.
And so I just watch.
You watch it.
I watch until the yes lights up.
Yes.
So that's what I mean by recreating your reality after deconstructing the trained reality. And the trained reality, you know this, like it feeds off of almost like conscription. Like everyone is, without realizing it, has been enslaved with debt, been enslaved with their consciousness, enslaved to the TV and to social media and to
Absolutely.
like this construct is basically entrap people. So
Absolutely.
that's what your term sovereignty is so awesome, because if you want to free yourself, first you take the red pill, but then you need to train your mind to recreate, to create a new construct, essentially.
There's this interesting relationship between energy and problems. The more we sit in meditation, the more we sit in breathwork, the more we do the inner game, the smaller our problems seem, right? If we're drained of energy, the littlest thing in life is going to feel extraordinarily overwhelming. And we're like, I can't handle it. And then when we get to that place of overwhelm, we give up our power and then we just conform to whatever is coming at us versus us being discerning about, no, that's not my truth. That's not what I'm deciding. When we're in that highly connected, energized state, no matter what comes at us, we have the discernment to go like the yes or the no. And that's one of the most valuable things that we could possibly do is get off our phones.
That's right.
Like really pay attention to what is stealing my life force. What is stealing my power? What is stealing my energy? What is stealing my focus? And be so disciplined about that so that we have the life force and the energy to really feel that power, that sense of self inside of us.
I love that. Well, a powerful visualization that supports what you're talking about would be to visualize yourself on a mountaintop, and you are sitting in a comfortable position, or kneeling if you're kneeling, meditation, whatever. And there's a cone around you of like white, clear light, and that cone is impenetrable. Right? It is absolutely impenetrable to any harm, any negative energy, any control or manipulation. And you can see almost through that cone, you see arrows of that coming at you all the time. It just bounces off. And inside that cone is utter stillness and silence. And that's your happy place, your natural state. And anytime something comes and presents itself to you at that cone, you have a choice, right? So that's the world presenting up its options, the yes and no, chasing on the circumference of that cone. And you're completely undisturbed by anything. And so when something comes knocking, you can just watch it. Don't let it in. And then if it's, after sitting with it, and with practice, this becomes almost like real time. After sitting with it in that timeless space, in that protective cone, if it's something that must happen, right? Because it's your dharma, it's part of your mission, then you let it in.
Yeah. So good.
And what's cool about this is the era, you can imagine, one of my favorite metaphors for awareness is that you are like the mountain, and then all the all the drama are like clouds passing in the sky. Sometimes there's a lot of thunder and lightning and rain and, what happened in California. Everyone thinks California's about ready to split off and sink in the ocean. Okay, there was a little bit of drama there, kind of magnified by the media for a little weather event. So all that just happens from a distance. It's like you said, the more aware you get, the further away the dramas become because you literally are removed from them.
Yeah.
The other metaphor that is just really awesome, it depends on whether you like sky metaphors or water metaphors. Water metaphors are great for me as a Navy SEAL, is that as you do your work, and even in a singular practice, you can just imagine yourself just like sinking down into the ocean. And as you look up, you see the waves, and the waves represent the drama, the stories, the choppiness, the thoughts. And down here, it's still. That's where that term "still water runs deep" comes from. One of my favorite guided visualizations that I lead, I introduced it early on. It's called "Still Water Runs Deep," where we go down and we just drop into this body of water.
So
and
good.
In that stillness, you're perfectly aware, but you are separated from and removed from thoughts. And imagery of water and space provide a very powerful simulation of the experience of awareness. So when it comes to practice, you think about like a continuum, right? Breath practice can open us up to a whole range of opportunities, and it's a great place to start. So we begin our practice and we begin to experience really the arousal. If it's a calming practice, I'm not talking about like a holotropic experience, like Wim Hof. That's a sympathetic nervous system jack you up experience. I'm talking about something like, like the mother's breath or just box breathing, anything where you're activating the parasympathetic nervous system and you're getting into a deep concentrated state. So like breathing, inhale 5, hold your breath, exhale 5, hold your breath. And now our mind is watching this pattern, right? So it's concentration training, it's attention control training, and it's arousal control training. There's 3 things happening with this very simple practice. Right? The arousal happens through the stimulation of the vagus nerve, the massaging that, calming down, activating, literally reactivating, for a lot of people, their parasympathetic nervous system, which has been atrophied. So de-stressing. That's arousal control. And then over time, that becomes, you have that skill in real time where just a few deep nostril breaths and you're calm. Well, you're also following the breath pattern. And so there's this ability to take your attention from there and keep it here and keep bringing it back, bringing it back until you can hold that for longer and longer periods of time. So that's attention control and concentration. Concentration, I mentioned earlier, it's like gathering up your thoughts, which are going over here, all over the place. These thought streams that are conditioned in and just activated and triggered here and there. 100,000 thoughts a day, same ones you had yesterday. So by collapsing our attention to a singular thing, and it doesn't have to be a box pattern, it can be a mantra, it can be anything. What we're doing is we're gathering up all this mental energy and we're channeling it.
So good.
So you become extraordinarily focused because you're able to take all of your mental energy and focus in one thought stream.
Oof.
Right?
Precision.
It's so powerful. And so then, like I said earlier, then we can take, over time, we can take that thought stream and we turn it around. And we direct it. Inward. It's a metaphor, right? Because there really is no in, out. So metaphorically, what we're doing is taking your attention from this being reality to what is generating this reality as reality. It'd be like, like a movie projector turning the light around in itself. It'd be like, where does that light come from?
For sure. Oof. So good.
So now we're getting someplace. It's the same practice. Okay. But in the early years of, I say early years because, I've been practicing since 1985.
Not so far I was born.
So let's just say in the early days, because there might be someone listening who's like, good God, do I have to wait 40 years? No. So in the early days of your practice, getting to that state that you talked about is a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to do a lot of hard, like holotropic breathing, or like the type of breathing that just gets so much oxygen and all this. It's not something you should do every day, right? There are a lot of contraindications to doing that intense breathing every day. When I interviewed Wim Hof, I felt like my freaking hair got blown back. And I sat down afterwards and box breathed, and then I fired up my computer and I recorded a warning, and I put the warning into my podcast.
Because he's like, just breathe, just breathe. Like so intense. I'm like, Wim, we don't have to do it like that all the time, bro.
No. And it's not good for you. And back to the ego development. If you have ego development issues, which a lot of people do, and it's not a judgment, if you do Wim Hof and you're moving all that energy, you could blow a gasket. It's just like the Kundalini. Same thing with Kundalini.
Yeah.
You got to be very, very...
Titration is what we teach at Pause a lot of, like really titrating the system and slowly bringing that energy in over time.
There's a time to do it.
Yeah.
And there's a time not to do it.
For sure. Absolutely.
So back to what my point was, is we can use imagery to accelerate our development.
Yeah.
Because once we get to that place where we can turn the light around and now we're looking, but what are we looking for? Well, you're not looking for anything. You're looking to go beyond the mind. But in order to go beyond the mind, you have to use the mind.
Yeah.
And one of the most effective ways to use the mind, to go beyond the mind, is to imagine the vastness of space.
Yeah.
Or imagine the vastness of the ocean. And when you do that, you immediately experience the stillness. And so you just hold that imagery until it dissolves, and then
so good.
Awareness is there for you.
So good. So good.
Isn't that cool?
Mark, this has been so awesome.
I'm so
happy that you came down. I'm so glad that I finally got to meet you.
Me too, Samantha.
This is so great.
You're right in my backyard.
I think we're neighbors.
Yeah, I live in Sea Bluff. Are you on Neptune?
I'm on Neptune.
You're on Neptune?
Yeah.
I walk by your place every Sunday, probably.
Do you surf at Grandview?
I don't surf anymore.
Oh, you don't surf?
I used to.
Oh.
Yeah. When I was in the SEALs, I got this, I was an SDV team, this submersibles.
Yeah.
And after that tour, my body like shunts blood from my fingers and my toes.
Yeah.
And I found out it's got a name. It's called Raynaud's.
Yeah.
And so even in, most people think California water is warm. It's not. Very rarely does it get warm. But I'm in for like 3 or 4 minutes and suddenly, like, I can't feel my hands.
Oh, interesting.
They're completely numb.
Oh.
It's such a bummer because I love the water.
Oh.
And I live right on the water.
Yeah. Well, you can see it every single day when you wake up.
I know. So I don't surf.
So where can our audience find you? We have an incredible audience of leaders and high achievers and just people on this path of growth and development. So where can they find your work? Because I know they'll definitely resonate with it.
Well, I can meet you at Coffee.
Yeah, come to
Sunday morning
Coffee.
at 10 o'clock.
Let's do a meetup. That would actually be awesome.
Well, yeah, the normal places. MarkDivine.com is like my sieve catch-all.
Okay.
You can learn about me there. And then
Awesome.
if you're like a warrior athlete and you are actually intrigued with my conversations about SEALFIT, then we do have the hardest training in the world still. It's waiting.
Really?
Waiting for you. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Waiting for you.
Do women do it?
Mm-hmm. I wish we had more.
Do you have to train to do it? Yeah.
For sure. Okay. Yeah, it's no joke. It was built for Navy SEAL trainees. 50 hours nonstop physical training.
What? You don't stop? You don't eat?
No stop.
You don't sleep?
Eat, yeah,
you eat.
But there's no sleep.
There's no sleep. You're up for 50 hours working out?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard, right? It's not like I was like watching this thing the other day about this 50-hour military training and they're like standing around, learning how to do weapons training. Like, no, that's skill development.
Yeah. Right? This is like,
it's
like a 50-hour hell week.
This is hell week.
Whoa.
So we use logs, sandbags, mountains,
Where do you do that? Texas?
We do it here. We base out of Vail Lake.
Oh, wow.
Which is up near Temecula.
Yeah.
400 acres. And then we use the ocean and we use the mountains. And it's an extraordinary event. It's very much, the reason we call it Kokoro is
Japanese
it's like
term.
Japanese word that means merging your heart and mind in actions.
Yeah, I love that word.
And so that's what happens. It's both an outcome and it's also what you need to do to thrive. It's pretty cool. And we do have short versions, Samantha.
Yeah,
so we
I was
do-
like 50 hours.
Yeah, we got a 6-hour, a 12-hour,
Hey,
24
I'm
hour.
so down.
You would love
down.
this.
I love doing stuff that makes me feel highly uncomfortable, and I just love pushing my body to the limits. It's so fun for me.
Yeah. I bet you do. We should do that.
I'm so
That's
down.
SEALFIT. Unbeatable Mind is really my integrated development and coaching. It came out of SEALFIT, but we stripped the military hardcore out of it. So like if your movement practices yoga, that's great.
Yeah.
As long as you're moving, right? You got to be moving your body every day, and then you got to move your mind. So the question is, how do you do both?
Yeah.
So most of the work for any really effective developmental program starts with the physical and mental, and then it will naturally lead to emotional and spiritual development. But like I said, mostly the spiritual side is just removing the obstacles, moving stuff. So Unbeatable Mind, we have, we've got, similar to you, I've got a mastermind and I do group training.
Amazing. Awesome. I love it. Well, I'll put all the links
Thanks.
in the show notes so people
Appreciate
can come
that.
hang out with you. And
I got the Mark Divine show.
oh yeah, go check out his podcast. We'll put that below too.
When are you going to be on my show?
Oh, let's do it. We can do it. Like right now. Let's just keep this camera rolling. Welcome to the Mark Divine Show. I'm Samantha Skelly. I know this is weird. Don't worry about it.
I love it.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
I
you very
appreciate
much.
you.